Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Peter Stephen. With over 40 plus years of IT experience, Peter is the creator of the Personality Agility System. You can see in the background of the Peter, the simple, scalable leadership framework for aligning actions with priorities. You may remember him from our previous sessions where he discussed the 10 agile contracts, the bridge between the procurement and the product delivery. So I will put the link in the comment if you missed it in the past. Peter also co-created the Agile Contract Manifesto. So friends, before we dive in, please show your love and support by hitting that like button. And if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, CareersTalk. With this, let's give a warm welcome to Peter. Peter, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sunand. It's an honor to be invited here once again. You saw my post a couple of weeks ago about backlog refinement and thought it'd be nice to have a little conversation about, well, the where and the why of backlog refinement. So I put together a couple of notes for you, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with your audience today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
So can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Two wonderful
Okay.
gentlemen over there.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, so Peter, I'm going to ask you one or two questions on this backlog refinement before we start, because rather than going deep into all these how, where, what, and when, we already have covered this in the past in couple of sessions. But the important question which I keep on getting from different Scrum Masters, Agile coaches is that why backlog refinement is important and why it's not a mandatory event. So that's something for you,
Okay.
Peter.
Okay, so let's start about, first of all, why it's important, okay? And we're going to discover that backlog refinement is essential to getting backlog items ready to the point that the team can take them and convert them into working functionality fairly easily. The idea is the team needs to understand the problem that they're trying to solve. And, backlog refinement is the conversations between, the people who will do the work and the people who are formulating the problem. So you could have subject matter experts or the product owner or stakeholders or, actual users and customers. You bring these people together so we get an understanding of what we're trying to do. We also want them to be small and clear and well enough understood so that, we have a high probability of being able to implement it correctly in the sprint, okay? And so we get to the end of the sprint and we have some features that the customers want. Now, a lot of people ask why it's not an event, and technically it's considered an activity. Why is it an activity? Well, the events in Scrum, they all happen at a very defined place and time. Okay, sprint planning is at the beginning of the sprint, the review and the retrospective are at the end of the sprint. The daily Scrum happens every day. Now, backlog refinement, when should that happen? When is the right time for that? Well, the short answer is it depends. And how much backlog refinement do you need? Well, that depends too. So the idea is it's simply defined as an activity that you do during the sprint. Obviously, you'll do a little bit before your first sprint, and then you'll keep doing it kind of on a just-in-time basis in the sprints while you're developing the product. So because it doesn't have a defined time slot, it's considered an activity, not an event.
Wonderful. So, what do you suggest, Peter, for let's say someone who is just starting? I mean, the team who is just starting using implementing, let's say, agile in their organization. So, what should be
Okay.
the, let's say if I have a sprint of let's say 3 weeks. So, what do you suggest? Whether
Okay.
we should do a backlog refinement for one time or two time or every week, or or maybe someone who is pretty mature, let's say, so they have
Okay.
very good backlog, healthy backlog. So what do you think about this?
Okay. Especially when you're starting out, I suggest doing it in small chunks because you're going to be learning how to do it. And there's nothing that kills motivation than just kind of an endless meeting where you're churning through an endless backlog. So, kind of focus on, what is your most important goal for the first sprint or maybe the first 3 months, and then really focus on the features that you want to do, the first thing that you want to demonstrate. What's the essential functionality of the product? What's the biggest risk in the product? These are what do you have to do to convince your stakeholders to invest more money in the product? These are the kinds of features that you'll want to focus on, at the beginning so that you can basically get positive results and positive interactions with your stakeholders. So that's where I would focus, focus your refinement efforts at the beginning. What are the most important features to have at the beginning? And as I say, do it in small chunks. The idea is to do it on a just-in-time basis. So, you might only, refine the backlog that you need for the first sprint, or maybe the first sprint and a half. And then during the first sprint, well, you work another sprint ahead. So you're always like 1 to 1.5 sprints ahead of what you're actually implementing. That, that's a place to start. Whether that's a perfect solution, I guess that kind of depends. But as you do it more and get better at it, well, you'll get better at it, and it'll be clearer to you what's the right intensity and frequency.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I think we are good for this slide. Yeah.
Okay. So the kind of what got this conversation started was a card on, or was the infographic I did. I've been doing a lot of infographics. 8 ways to split a story. And the first question that comes up is, well, when is the backlog item small enough? Okay, and should you estimate them, or should you, do you have to estimate them? And there's a very, very simple way of estimating, where you split the backlog items into 3 boxes. Okay, the first box is 1, fits easily into the sprint. Okay, the next is TFB. Okay, and as you can see on the slide, the T and the B I've explained, too big, that F is for you to figure out. And of course, for things that are really huge or not clear at all, we have the superlative, which is NFC, okay? And the N, it means no, and the C means clue, and that F is forever the same. And hopefully everyone's figured it out by now. So anyway, so the idea is to get the backlog items down so that they're small enough so that they fit easily into the sprint. So, well, what does small enough mean? And one of the downsides of backlog items that are too big, and teams that don't work together in a team, is you have a lot of spillover. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just try to visualize kind of what's happening with the work over time. Okay, so we start by visualizing the team. And here I got 6 people, with different skills, abilities, backgrounds, whatever, and these people have come together to work on the project. The next thing we're going to do is visualize the sprint. Okay, and in this example, we have, we have a 10-day sprint, 2 weeks. Okay, there's 6 people, so there's 60 boxes there. 60 person days are in that sprint. Now, let's start accounting for, the things that are going to happen during the sprint. Obviously, one of the most important is the sprint planning and sprint review. That takes up about a day. The daily scrum is kind of below the noise floor here. That takes a little bit of time too, but it's not really visible on this chart. The next thing that comes along are a lot of companies, and this is something I see over and over, that people are bogged down in meetings. Okay, and so we've got, we got one-on-ones, we got status reviews, we got stakeholder meetings, we got, lots and lots of meetings that actually aren't part of the Scrum flow. In fact, a lot of people say, oh, how can we possibly do Scrum? Just more meetings. Well, that's just what we need. Okay, well, what you do with the other meetings is real simple. Okay, you need to cancel them. Okay, if someone needs to go to meetings outside the team that are on invitation from people outside the team, that's the Scrum Master's job or the product owner's job. The developers, the idea is the developers get to focus on their jobs, which is creating the product. Okay, so now we've got the sprint. One thing which I would suggest you do is allocate some reserves. Okay, don't plan every last minute of the sprint. Maybe plan a full day. Sometimes things take longer than you think. Stakeholders have been known on occasion to want to sneak in something during the sprint, so don't plan yourself to the last minute, because that's really just setting yourself up to fail. So now the question is, what do we do with the rest of the time? Now, many teams, they do their estimation and they say, okay, well, this is a 5 or this is an 8. Okay, now a 5 is 5 days out of what's basically an 8 or 9 day sprint, and a good estimate is only plus minus 50%. So if that 5 turns out to be an 8, well, you're getting real close to the end of the sprint there. Okay, and if that 8 turns out to be a 13, well, you've now gone over the end of the sprint. So keeping things small makes it easy to keep things in the sprint. Now, the other problem is that many teams, they divide the work. You take the first story, I'll take the second, someone else takes the third, someone else takes the fourth. Okay, and so we divide our time in parallel. And notice how we don't really get our stories done until very late in the sprint. Okay, and this actually produces produces a lot of work for the product owner because very often the product owner or someone else has to validate the work that's been done. And this creates a lot of tension as to whether things will really be done at the end of the sprint. Okay. The other problem that we have is, even if we do get something done with 3 days left, we don't really have the work ethic or the work style, which lets us get things done in the last few days of the sprint. Okay. If a stakeholder comes along and wants us to do something else, we have to stop what we're doing to work on that other thing, and it may not fit anyway. So it makes it very, very difficult to achieve our goals at the end of the sprint. So what's the alternative? Well, if we think of our teams as teams and work together as a team, then what we do is we say, okay, we got 3 people, they're going to focus on story 1. And the story is small enough when they can get it, let's say 3 people in about 2 days, or maybe 2 people in about 3 days, something on that order of magnitude. And, then the next group, they work on story 2. And notice, by focusing on this, by swarming on the individual stories, we actually get, we have 2 of our stories done after 3 days into the sprint. And then we go to work on the next, and then we go to work on the next. And if the stakeholder comes and says, well, actually, I'd like you to work on story 10, well, we plan to do story 5, but we could swap it out. Okay, so this gives us both, makes us both more predictable, because this team is almost surely going to get, at least 6 of those stories done of the 8 that they forecast, and maybe even 8, maybe even 9. And it also makes them more flexible because it doesn't totally throw them out of balance when when a new requirement comes in. They'll just push something off into the future to make room for the new one. So anyway, that's what backlog refinement gives you, is the flexibility and the
So,
ability to
Peter,
be reliable. Yes,
I have 2 questions. Can you go back?
sure.
Okay, so you talked about reserves over here. So, according
Yes.
to you, what should be the number? I mean, some proportion, for example, 5 to 10% of my capacity, or 10 to 15% of my capacity. What should be that ratio? Do you think is good enough?
Um, what I generally encourage teams to do is to make their stories small enough that they could forecast 10 in the sprint. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of those items is a retrospective item, something that came out of the retrospective to improve themselves. And another one you could take as a reserve. Okay. So something that, a brilliant idea that the product owner is going to have, or, something that we'll pull in late in the sprint if we see that we have the capacity. So, if we say our target size is about 1/10 of the team's capacity, that means that, as I say, if you were doing it in days, well, that probably adds up to about 5 person days. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
5, maybe 6. Okay, and that I think is a good size. And by the way, if you get all your stories down that small, then when you're estimating bigger stories, really what you're doing is you're just taking a guess. How many cards do we think we're going to have when we're finished estimating, when we're finished refining? Okay. And so, that makes everything much more tangible and much easier to compare what you're actually achieving with what you thought you could achieve. Because,
Okay.
the big problem with story points is that they're so vague and they tend to inflate, whereas this is nice and tangible.
Okay. And Peter, just for my understanding, what I understood is that you are suggesting that rather than every individual should work on story 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yep.
group of people should work on, let's say, story 1 first, they
Yep.
finish it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Then let's say
Yep.
2, 3 people will pick story 2, they finish it first, then they jump to the story 3 and 4, right? So
Exactly.
don't you
Exactly.
think that in this way we are creating a sub team under our main team? Do you think this is kind of anti pattern, or
Let's put it this way: with any tool or approach, you can use it well or you can use it badly. Okay.
Mhm, mhm,
The pictures I drew here were very simplified because it's very difficult to
mhm, mhm.
express the concepts and reflect the
Correct.
full complexity. How
Mhm,
dynamic this is in real life, maybe one thing which I did is notice certain people have got different skills, and that's
yeah.
symbolized by the colors here. Okay,
Mhm, mhm.
and so maybe we find that these green skills, well, sometimes we need them up here and sometimes we need them down there,
Okay.
but we don't need them the whole time. Okay, and so
Okay.
this is why we have a daily scrum, and this is why people figure out at the beginning of each day as a whole team what it is that we're going to do. And by the way, this is not the only way to do it. I mean, you could
Yeah.
do pairing, you could do swarming. Swarming is when the whole team works on a problem. This is kind of what I've
Okay.
illustrated here is kind of a midpoint.
Okay.
And what I'd really encourage teams to do is to experiment, try things out, see how they work for you. Start with pairing, do a couple of code dojos to use the code dojo to teach you how to pair, but that also teaches you how to swarm. And then you can decide if you like swarming. And you may discover that you like swarming so much that you want to keep doing it. And that you don't even need a daily scrum because you're working together the whole day as one team. So there's more than one way to approach the problem. And I think the important thing is for the teams to really take ownership of their solutions and constantly look for or continuously look for better solutions.
Agree. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Peter. I think we can move on.
Okay. So I put down, I started with a couple of tips on backlog refinement. And, one of the things that we hear over and over is start with why. Maybe you've seen the video from Simon Sinek or the TED Talk. On the other hand, we go into development teams, especially if they're working in any kind of service organization, and they've got these endless backlogs of features that have no real connection to each other. And the clients find it very difficult even to hold their word for 2 weeks about what features they want before they change their mind and want something else. Okay. And this is all a symptom of not having much clarity of purpose. Okay. If you don't have a destination, well, then everybody fights over the rudder. And so one of the things to do, when you're starting out with the backlog refinement process, get clarity about what is the outcome that you're striving for. Okay. And the outcome is not just what is the feature we're going to deliver this sprint, but what is the impact this product should have for the company and its users and the rest of the world. And you start with that goal in mind. Okay. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure that the features that you're conceiving, that they're really focused on achieving that goal. Okay. And really challenge requirements, challenge assumptions, always look for the justification why you need something. And look for fat that you can cut out, okay? Because every line of code that you write takes time and costs money and has to be maintained. Only some of those lines bring value. And what we're trying to do is maximize the number of lines of code not written, that is the lines of code that don't bring value. Those we don't want to write.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go on to some more concrete techniques. Okay. And, which technique to use is, kind of depends on, what's your context. If you're at the beginning of a project, you're trying to figure out what the product is and what features it has to have, and, who are all the, the users and clients and stakeholders who you need to take into account. Starting with who is often better than starting with why. Okay, so what do? You think about the users. Okay, so for instance, if we were talking a fintech application, okay, we might talk about, well, individuals who want to pay for stuff. We have shops who want to sell stuff. We have restaurants who also want to sell stuff, but their participants or their clients are going to want to split the bill. So we can start thinking about the various users of the system. And then we can talk about their goals. What are they trying to achieve through the system? Okay, and this is very, very useful at the brainstorming phase to kind of figure out, who do we have to make happy moving forward? And then once we've identified who the key stakeholders are and what their key objectives are, then we can start thinking about which features we need to deliver for them. Okay, so that's a very, very elegant way to kind of create the initial backlog and identify what the main features of the product should be. Okay. Now, and if you have a question, just jump in. I'll just try to.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, so for this persona, see, still Peter, like I don't know for what reason that people still most of the time maybe they have a pressure to deliver or something that they even don't ask this question to their product owner that who will be the end user, who is going to use it. So these personas, I think, is a very good thing that we should do, but most of the time people ignore it. So
Yeah.
and then in the last they will have the consequences because they are creating something which they don't know who is going to use it. Yeah. So
Well, that's the result. If you don't have a concept of who's going to use it, chances are good you're going to create something that's unusable for them. Okay. And then they'll come back to you screaming, say, how could you possibly do this? Any fool could recognize that, ... And, this is where the fighting begins. Okay. So, this is what I talk about. A Scrum team solves a problem. In order for them to solve the problem, they have to understand the problem. And the persona is helping them think through the problem so that they understand the users, hopefully better than they understand themselves, so that they can build the right solution. Now, a very common mistake is to say, oh, well, as a user, I want. Okay. There is nobody out there who is intrinsically a user of your system. He may decide to use your system for their purpose or goals. And even for very technical stories, there's usually a person in the background who would like to have that feature implemented for a particular reason. Okay. So what you're trying to do is get at the why, the why you're implementing this particular feature, because that both justifies spending the time and the money on it, and it helps you deliver the right feature for the purpose you're trying to solve.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, we can move on.
Okay. This is actually one of my favorites. I call this how to demo. Okay, and so the idea is you've got a feature like, well, let's go back to our fintech application. I'd like to pay a bill at a restaurant. Okay, so how do we envision that working? Well, okay, so let's see. What we're going to do is we're going to activate the app. We need to scan something so we know who the restaurant is. So we're going to, scan the QR code. Oh, well, do we have to enter the amount, or is the amount in the QR code? Oh, well, it would be better if the amount were in the QR code. Do I want to add a tip? Okay, etc. And so what you do is you end up with a workflow that says, okay, activate the function, scan the QR code, add the tip, hit pay, see the receipt. Okay, and with that, you've now got something. You can write this on the back of the card or in the comments of the card, to actually validate it with the stakeholders. Okay, so we thought it was going to work like this. Let me work through these steps with you. Now, the other thing is, if these things turn out to be complex, one of those items, each step in the how to demo can become a card itself. Okay, and so, if you're saying, okay, we want to, as a private customer, I'd like to be able to make payments with with our fintech app. Okay, what kind of payments would you like? Well, I'd like to be able to pay at a restaurant. I'd like to be able to split the bill. I'd like to be able to send money to my kids. I'd like to be able to receive money from my kids or someone else, etc. And so each one of those things, okay, to show that we've got the payment features, that's the list of things that we have to show. These cards are still probably fairly big. So they're, if at the beginning we were NFC, now we're at TFB. But then for each of those cards, we can go and, create a how to demo for that. And we might discover that those cards are one, or we might discover that we need to split it down some more. Okay, but this is, I like how to demo because it's very tangible. And even if you're dealing with something abstract, you can talk about it in a way that everybody can understand it, both the developers and the users.
Yeah, I think we are good on this. Yeah.
Okay. Now, a somewhat more formal definition of this is to say acceptance criteria. How do we know that the thing works? Okay, and what I've seen a lot, like in integration projects, or when you're upgrading a, I just did this today. I was upgrading doing an upgrade on my website, and changing how some of the payment workflows work. Okay, so it's not so much that we specified an exact workflow, but I have a list of things that have to work properly. Okay, and so from the developer's point of view, well, he's got the main chunk of the work, and then he's got these list of acceptance criteria, and he's going to go through and work through each one of those acceptance criteria. The acceptance criteria is actually, there's kind of a, in my opinion, kind of a fuzzy line. So it's between unit tests and acceptance tests. Okay, acceptance tests have got more external relevance. But conceptually, they're both tests, they both produce green lights, and which means you can automate both. Okay, so being clear on how the thing works, this makes it a lot easier when you get into the sprint review, when you know what you're shooting for.
Yeah,
Ready for
thanks,
next?
Peter. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Now, we talked about agile contracts. There is one word that I never want to see in an agile, in any kind of contract, and those are the words "et cetera" when we're talking about a function. Okay, so a very common sort of requirement is, as a private customer, I'd like to search for payments and transfers and display them. Okay, so notice I want to search for payments. I want to search for transfers. I want to display payments. I want to display transfers. Okay, and so these and or, and other dividers, these are logical breakpoints where you can say, let's use this. Let's get that search part working, and then we'll do the display part next. Oh, let's do transfers first, and then we'll do payments. Okay, whatever. That lets you. This is a very easy way to identify granularity in your requirements. Ready for the next one?
Peter, in fact, I have seen that, I mean, somewhere down the line when we have these and or, it is also kind of indication that we have to split this user story more. So if let's say
Yes.
if I want this and I want this, it means there are two separate user story, not a one user story. What do you think about it? These
Exactly.
are,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. That's, as I say, a conjunction is a logical breakpoint. Okay. Think of it.
correct.
This is the wobbly connection. This is glue. Okay. A
Yeah,
conjunction is glue, and the glue is always weaker. Okay. So that makes it a very nice place to break.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Very closely related to this, when we're talking about manipulating any kind of object, search, create, read, update, and delete. Looks like we're missing a hyphen in that what is it, on that post-it. These are easy places to kind of split your stories. Okay, well, let's first create the object. Okay, now let's read the object or display the object. Then we search for the object. Then we update the object. Oh, do we have to delete the objects? Delete is actually a good candidate to postpone, because usually at the beginning of a system we need to create stuff, and deleting stuff is well, yes, maybe someday, but not today. Kind of depends.
So you meant to say, Peter, in the previous slide that this is the kind of sequence which we can follow as a developer, that okay, we should focus more on search and create and maybe read functionality in the beginning when we are working on a project, and maybe later part we can think about deleting or archiving.
Yeah, well, I mean, like how long were you able to do were able to use WhatsApp before you could edit or delete a message? Okay, these are relatively young features in WhatsApp, and as far as I know, they only did it because their competition is doing it. So some of these features, creation, search, read, update. Well, probably update. These are fairly important features because you're going to need to have them because you're going to use them a lot. Deletion may be something that you postpone for later because you don't do it that much at the beginning. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I mean, I'm giving you hypotheticals here.
Okay.
But yeah, but the idea is these are logical places, logical, again, if we say I want to manage payments, well, what does manage payments mean? Search, create, read, update, delete.
True.
Okay.
In fact, I think
Those,
this is the same across any of the requirement, honestly. Like either we are creating something, either we are reading something,
yeah,
or either we are searching something, right, in that particular functionality.
exactly.
So I
Yeah,
think this is
yeah,
applicable to all the requirements in a way. Yeah.
yeah. These are very common operations.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the next one is to really think about our blind spots. Okay. What are the unhappy cases that can come up? Okay. So for instance, if we're talking about the payment transaction, what happens if the person doesn't have enough money in their account and they can't do the payment? What happens then? That's actually a case. It's an unhappy case and even an embarrassing case. Okay. But the idea is to think through these cases as well. Okay. If the unexpected happens.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Now, one problem that often occurs is, especially if we're doing something new, we really have no clue how it works. We really have no clue how to implement it, and we have no clue which technology we want to use. And so here, a very common approach is to make what's called a spike. Okay, and the idea is you take about 2 days, maybe 2 developers for 2 days. Remember my ideal story size. Um, you take 2 days to create a prototype with whichever technology you think is most appropriate. That gives you something concrete that you can demonstrate and use to get feedback and build understanding. And so the idea is, kind of once you've got this first round of feedback and gotten some understanding of what the problem is, then you're in a better position to write the stories. Okay, so sometimes you have to get into the dirt before you can get down and dirty before you can really think through the process completely. But then you do it with more understanding.
Peter, I think this spike thing is misunderstood, I would say, because
Hmm.
sometimes people ask me that, okay, first of all, what is spike itself? They are not
Yeah.
clear. And then
Hmm.
sometimes they ask, okay, how we can estimate a spike, whether a spike should be of 1 hour or 2 hours or 2 days or so. How, I mean, do you think that as a team we should estimate a spike because they are taking their time from their current
Okay.
capacity, right? So how do you tackle this situation? Yeah.
So notice my approach is to say there's really only one size, and that's one. Fits easily in the sprint. Okay. Now, if we take 2 people, 2 days, that's about the same. That's basically a one. It fits easily in the sprint. Okay. And, just as, we used to estimate tasks in hours, but we don't do that anymore because it produces a lot of work and doesn't give much value. We're kind of heading in the same direction with estimating. It's a lot of work. It produces a lot of heat because the developers are always, oh, these horrible developers, they never deliver on time. Um, Everything else that's happening that makes those estimates worthless or not achievable. No one wants to talk about that. So I just say, let's keep estimation as lightweight as possible. Okay, we get our stories down to the point where they fit easily in the sprint, and the spike is one of those stories. So I would just count it as one and move on. Okay. Now, obviously, again, it depends. If it's something that's relatively straightforward and you're done in 2 hours, well, hey, you're done in 2 hours. Then you'll get an extra card done that sprint, and that's no big deal either. No one's going to complain about that if it's faster.
Okay, thanks,
Yeah.
Peter.
I think one of the things that you know, particularly with something like Scrum, which has developed, or software development, which has kind of developed all these vocabulary and techniques, it's very easy to get lost in the process and kind of lose track of what really matters here. Okay,
True.
what really matters is coming up with the right features for the product. What really matters is understanding the feature well enough that we can define it. Okay, that we can formulate it as a backlog item. And worrying about the bookkeeping, well, it consumes time, but it doesn't actually produce any value. Okay, so let's try to keep those bookkeeping discussions as simple as possible and as minimalistic as possible. And that's kind of the idea behind the, I think that's called the lean startup scale, or the no estimate scale. One
Yeah.
TFB NFC. Okay, that should be enough. If you need to do budgeting, well, just guess how many cards it's going to be after you've refined it. Okay, maybe you need to get it down to TFB before you can make that guess. Okay, and then just add up your guesses, and that makes the math very, very easy.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, so the last thing is perhaps the hardest to visualize, because things like user interface, we say we want it to be easy to use. Okay, how do we know that it's easy to use? Well, we don't actually know that it's easy to use until we've put it in front of a user and they've tried to use it. And I can speak from experience. There's nothing scarier than going into a shopping mall with a prototype of your product and then showing people the product and seeing if they can use it. So what that means is you're going to have to iterate on them. Okay, and say, okay, we want to improve the user interface. We want to improve the performance. Okay, and the basic approach is going to be you're going to make some improvements. You're going to test it. If you're happy, you're good. If you're not happy, you're going to have to repeat the process. Okay, and so particularly for things like user interface, I would be or performance issues, I would be thinking about iterating on them. And say, okay, well, we're going to make an improved version of the UI. Okay, and what's that UI going to be? Well, we'll know when we finish designing it. Okay, before that, you just don't know.
Correct.
Okay, so we've kind of gone through the list. I had a do list and I had a don't list, or an avoid list, and what we have here is the avoid list, the traps to avoid that can cause you problems. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will mention maybe 2 or 3 that are, typical symptoms. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So
please.
the first one is not having an outcome in mind. In fact, that's probably, I put that in the upper left-hand corner because I think that's the one I see most often. Okay, we're just crunching out features and we don't know why we're building the features, and even the stakeholders aren't very convinced because they're going to change their mind before the sprint is over. Lower right-hand corner, this is for entrepreneurs, really dangerous, or in an entrepreneurial state. You create this wonderful product in an ivory tower. To you, it looks wonderful, but until you test your ideas in the real world, you don't know if they're any good or not. If you see technical stories, oh, wait a minute, but we've got a front end and a back end, and the front end needs a story and the back end needs a story, okay? This is a sign that your teams are not cross-functional and that you don't have all the know-how in one place to solve the problem, okay? So what that means is you're gonna have issues with integration, you're gonna have integrations with issues with poor solutions. What you need to be thinking about is how can we get all of the skills together in the team? Okay, and that can be a very big problem. This is why being a Scrum Master is often a full-time job. The topic of task planning. Okay, a lot of people think backlog refinement is doing a traditional work breakdown analysis, but task planning, that happens in sprint planning. Okay, a refined backlog item is still a backlog item. Okay, and well, maybe we'll just round this one out with premature specification. So if you're telling people how to do it early on, that's when you have the least knowledge, okay? And that hinders your ability to come up with a good solution. So, maybe as a conclusion, I'd like to, kind of remind people about the invest test. Is your story independent? Can you prioritize it in any order? Is it negotiable? Okay, can you have a conversation about how to do it, or is everything specified? Is it valuable? Okay, and if so, to whom? Okay, and the closer that is to a paying customer or a real user, the better. The closer it is to the team or the organization or to your management, the more you need to challenge whether we need to do it and whether we need to do it now. Okay, the rest, can you estimate it? Is it testable? Is it small? I think it's small enough if it will fit in, if you can get 9 or 10 of them into the sprint. Testable is about clarity, and estimable, well, if I were going to give one piece of advice, I would say make fewer estimates, but do more backlog refinement, because backlog refinement really adds value to the team and the organization so that you know what you're building and can build it effectively. With that, I think I can say thank you for the opportunity. I pass the microphone back to you. Are there any questions?
Can you go back to the previous slide, Peter?
Sure.
Yeah. So specifically, this point, premature specification. So too many details can prevent better solution. I think this is something really great which people forget. I saw opposite of it. People ask that if you give us more detail, that can be better. So can you just explain this little bit more about this point? That too many
Well,
details can prevent better solutions. It means
so,
I
so
think that
let,
people will stop thinking about the solution. They already have something and they just do it, right?
exactly. So let me give you an example. I'm going to leave the e-banking or the fintech solution for a moment, and we're now doing a job portal. Okay.
Okay.
And we had a story that said, as a job hunter, I want to get an email every day with the latest interesting job applications.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, where do we put in specifications in that? Okay. And there are actually 2 places. The first is we said email, and the second is we said every day. Oh, and by the way, we forgot the why. Well, what's the why? Well, the why is I want to be able to respond quickly so that I come in first and have a chance of being seen. If I come in as number 725, my application is going to go nowhere. Okay, so, but what's the problem with specifying daily and email? Well, the first question is daily often enough? Is daily too often? How often do jobs come up? Okay, and by saying daily email, we've already, just exactly as you said, we've kind of removed that from the conversation. Oh, we're doing a daily email. Okay, fine. Okay, same is true with email. Okay, now, if you're trying to reach established career people, maybe emails are okay. On the other hand, the average person this day gets 100 emails a day, and 80% of it is spam. So if they get an email, they may or may not notice it. Maybe a notification would be better. Maybe we want to make our own app. Maybe they're doing something in WhatsApp or Discord. I don't know. But by specifying email at the beginning, we prevent that conversation about what's the best way to reach the audience. Much later, when my son was looking for his first job, he was about 16 and looking for an apprenticeship. He had to log into this job portal system that would help him find an apprenticeship, and it asked for an email, and he didn't have an email back then. He had Discord, he had WhatsApp, he had probably other chat programs that I've never heard of, but an email wasn't really on his radar screen. And so from that point of view, you could say, well, maybe it's at 16, maybe he has to have email, but maybe we could reach him more effectively if we used a tool that he was already using. And that's the conversation that you want to have. What's the best way to solve the problem, given what we know today? And you want to have that conversation at what we call the last responsible moment, because that's when you know the most.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Peter, for that. Yeah, I think we are good.
Okay,
friends. So I think with this, we came to the end of this session. So thank you, Peter, for sharing your valuable insight on this backlog refinement and the art of splitting stories. So we are truly grateful for your time and knowledge. And to our viewers, we hope you enjoyed this session and found it informative. If you did it, please hit that like button and share this video with your colleagues and on LinkedIn. And subscribe to our channel for more enriching content. So until next time, keep embracing the agility in your work and life. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.